I'm going to ask us right now to fasten our seat belts because we are going on now to the lecture. And this is very important. I have been under the sound of her voice at various fora, and when she talks, she's a delight. Her name rings bells very loud globally, louder in Nigeria, loudest in the Southwest, and if there's any word like that, loudest in Lagos. Ibukun Awosika is an entrepreneur, a business executive, as well as an ordained pastor. She is a graduate of chemistry from the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. Because of time, I'm going to paraphrase the rest of her citation, but I refer you to page 105 of the program. Okay. I should read everything. Thank you. So I'm referring you to page 105, but let me just say one or two things about her, and then we will hand over the microphone to her. I'm asking you to fasten your seatbelts. We need rapt attention to be able to be blessed by this paper that she's going to present. Ibukun Awosika is a co-founder and past chairperson of Women in Business, Management and Public Service. She's a founder of the Christian Missionary Fund, a faith-based organization that works with hundreds of missionaries spread across Nigeria to change lives with the provision of medical, educational, and other supplies. She's a multiple award-winning entrepreneur and the first Nigerian recipient of the prestigious International Women Entrepreneurial Challenge Award as a nominee of the U.S. Department of State in 2008. She is the first female and immediate past chairman of the First Bank and has spoken of numerous world conferences and platforms where she shares her knowledge on several economic and faith-based topics. She's married, happily married, to Ibukun Awosika, and they are blessed with 3 wonderful sons. It's indeed a privilege to have her here to deliver this lecture. So, ladies and gentlemen, can you accord Pastor Mrs. Ibukun Awosika and prepare for her lecture?
I was built to be the best. Stand up for the champions, for the champions. Stand up, stand up, stand up for the champions, for the champions. Stand up for the champions, for the champions. Stand up, stand up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's definitely my pleasure to be here. I thank and acknowledge the chairman of the occasion, a great former Minister of Health and Vice Chancellor of University of Ibadan. I do not want to start a university competition war with all the UI. I'm an Ibadan girl, so I can identify with the fight for UI. However, we know that there's some universities that are great, and there's no dispute about the great universities. So Ife is not just great by name, it's great as an institution. But I will stop it there so that there will be no war. It will not be like the jollof rice between the Ghanaians and the Nigerians. You know, the fruit of Ife graduates or professionals, they're all over the world and there for everybody to see. Don't worry, there's no competition with Ibadan. Remember, I'm still an Ibadan girl, so I identify with all the firsts of Ibadan. I would like to thank the national president and the incoming president and all protocols duly observed as I still have to take on the express road to get back to Lagos. To be honest, as I've sat through since morning when I arrived till now, you know, I've had my heart running back and forth about so many things and thoughts. Because as I checked a few data, I kept wondering, you know, why do we do this to ourselves consistently? Because I've listened to a lot of dynamic, driven brilliant minds that are women in the medical field today, coming from different angles in their fields of practice and sharing their knowledge. And it shows the level of impact and contribution that the women continue to make in the medical field. I also know that in the statistics shows us that the population of Nigeria is relatively 50-50 between the men and the women. It's 49.2 for women and like 50 point something for the men, you know, which statistically is like a 50-50 situation. And then I went to search for the history of all the ministers of health, the chairman, your colleagues over the years since independence. And it was so embarrassing to imagine that in a nation that has 50% of its population as women, and may I make a case that it's not just about having 50% of the population as women, it's about the fact that in every household, like the president, the current president, is eager to leave in order to go and look after her husband and support the medical people looking after him. Because in every household, there's a woman who is a mother, and she's not the carer of her daughters or the women in her household or in her neighborhood. She's a carer of the family and the nation, because in every home, at least in most homes and in the nation, there are women, there are men, there are children, and the woman does not, what's the word? Went blank on it. She doesn't discriminate in terms of who she's looking after. She's a provider of care and service to all gender in her view. And yet, I looked at, and I thought there was a mistake. I had to call my assistant back and say, look, are you sure you checked that it's not that they forgot to put Mrs. or that some are not Mrs. but they're women, that some of the names actually belong to women? He said, no, ma, there's only been one minister of health in the history of Nigeria that is a woman. I mean, it's almost upsetting to the point that you are embarrassed for your nation and you are ashamed and you just think that, I mean, I'm sorry, but I do apologize, and I never beat men up. Why? I'm married to a man and I only have sons. So I'm on the side of the men. So this is not a gender matter. This is about a matter of equity and doing what is even in the interest of your nation. Because statistically, globally, any organization that has great diversity in its leadership, that involves men and women and allows them to come from the different perspectives and combine their knowledge, profits better and performs better. And in the midst of this pandemic, records have shown that the nations that outperformed every other nation were nations that were led by women across the world. It's not because the men cannot be as smart or are not as smart as those women leaders. It's because there's a component of a woman that is compassionate, that is empathetic, that is used to caring, that is a builder of nurturing. And in a sector that requires all of those factors added to the technical knowledge, which the women are at par with the men in terms of competitiveness, there's absolutely no way to begin to understand that a nation can do itself such great disservice by choosing that we will only continue to look at our nation and our healthcare system with one eye and keep the other eye permanently closed. And we choose not to benefit from the perspective that that eye, which is the stronger eye for care, can bring to the table. I didn't come here to cause any war between men and women. Remember, I'm married to a great man and I have 3 sons. And I'm all about us being able to deliver the best service in the interest of our nation. But it's just, as a business person, it's almost unimaginable that I will deliberately put myself at a disadvantage. And that seems to be what we've done. But now, we've talked about the nation, but let's come back to a very intelligent group of people. Because when I think about the number of years it takes to get a medical degree and the effort and the talent that needs to go in to you becoming, you know, great medical professionals and professors at different levels, you know, and all of that. And we all have to trust our lives into the hands of these smart doctors. Then I went to look at the Nigerian Medical Association. And I'm even more embarrassed because then I'm out of the scope of the general Nigerian situation. And I've come into a microcosm, a smaller group that is more alike, that I can recognize their ability to think through things and make the right kind of judgments. And I looked through from 1960 or whenever to now, all the presidents that the Nigerian Medical Association has ever had. And it's exactly the same situation as the nation in terms of its ministers of health. There's only been one woman 36 years ago that has been the president of the Nigerian Medical Association. And I'm sitting down trying to be calm because it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. But however, the way I am trained is not about what other people do. It's about what I do to solve the problem that I have. And so I've come today to challenge you. You've heard enough of all the medical things. That's why I sat quietly. I have no slides because I knew you would have been killed and numbed out in your brain with slides from all your medical presentation. And considering I'm not a medical person, in fact, my sons asked me last night, "You're going to Ibadan tomorrow?" I said, "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to speak at the Women's Medical Association and all of that." And they said, "But why? You're not a medical person, so why do they want you to come and speak there?" I said, "Well, it's from a different perspective." And they just couldn't figure out why. So the reality is this. So I bring you the layman's perspective to just challenge you to think differently about the situation you found yourself in, to think differently about the fact that you have a responsibility to challenge the status quo, because it's not just about you, it's about the value that you can give to a nation, because you have capacity, you have natural innate gift, and you also need to organize yourself and equip yourself to have the capacity to occupy positions of leadership in order to make the change that you seek. You know, when that last panel on the NGOs and all of that in the healthcare sector, I remember that the professor that was the chair of the session said at the end of the day, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this better, you need to do that." You know, technical competence is one thing, but when it comes to leadership and governance, you need to be a lot more deliberate. The entire curriculum for medical training in Nigeria needs to be revisited in a way that you are not only producing doctors, but you're producing doctors that will be efficient managers and doctors that can sit in leadership at any level, addressing many factors even beyond medical. Now, what is the biggest proof of that for me? I have seen the most brilliant minds in medicine set up private hospitals and fail. The statistics are staggering in terms of the number of failed hospitals set up by doctors that are known to be exceptional in their particular field. What does that tell you? You teach a mechanic how to fix the car, but you didn't teach him how to run his workshop. He's never going to succeed. His skills and his talent will be there, but it's not enough for him to sustain his ability to build a business, continuously improve his skills, and leave a legacy that will be passed to his children. And the challenge right now is that because we're not building that leadership skill as part of our curriculum, and we're not building the management training into our medical curriculum, we are killing the resources. We're not maximizing the capacity of those resources to deploy value for the nation. We've had many ministers of health, and with all due respect, we have one very able one sitting at the table. The question we need to ask ourselves is, why are we still in the state that we're in? And I know that you ended this with leadership, governance, and women's health. But I find it difficult to talk to you about just women's health. Why? Why are you putting yourself in a box? Are you doctors that attend to women alone in your clinics? Or do you treat men and women, anybody that comes into you? So why are we even talking about women's health? We're talking about health for a nation. Because when you want to be the minister of health that makes a change in a nation, there's no minister for women's health. There's only a minister of health. And the Minister of Health is concerned with the health of all citizens, men and women, adults and children. And the way you position yourself affects how people view you. If you position yourself in a narrow box, then you are narrowed into that area. And where they're looking for talents amongst the women, it's only when they have issues that are related to women's health that they will look for you guys. And when they're talking about national health issues, they would think they need the men, not because the women are incompetent, but simply because they have not been positioned to show their talents and their skills. And may I say that the system of education in itself has not prepared most health professionals to be successful in position of leadership outside of their core area of technical skills. And it shows in the results that we have. It also shows in our approach. Now, what do we need to do? We need to go back. We need to go back into the curriculum and rebuild so that we start building a whole new generation of medical professionals who are also prepared to be leaders across multiple fields. We must also be realistic people who understand that if you want real change, it's the guys who sit in power and position who control it. It doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter what ideas or opinion you have. You can go to a meeting and give the best opinion. The guy who has the final say will decide if it happens or not. And so when you have sat for over 60 years and you've watched that your ideas have not produced the kind of results that you have sought after, that effectively by systematically you as women have been kept out of the seat. Because what is wrong in a governance policy for the NMA that says that, sorry, can you guys help us here?
That is to say, completing the building.
Guys, we will take out of your money.
Because it means that if you follow this.
Are we good? Thank you. And you know, every woman in this house, and you know the thing I found interesting, a lot of the female doctors are also married to men in the medical field. For whatever reason, there seems to be quite a few. Am I right or wrong? So where is your power of influence? Because even if the men outnumber you in the medical association, when you go for the elections, there are men who are on your side as well because you sleep on the same bed with them. Yes, and a woman has the power of influence, but you must earn it. It is not just taken, you must earn it. Which means that as you prove yourself capable and competent in terms of your areas and show the leadership skills that are required for real change, and as you make yourself relevant in terms of thought leadership and in the change that is required in order to change healthcare system in our country, then there must be a point where we get to that between your technical skills, your power of influence, and how you organize yourself strategically in order to be able to deliver the results, that we will turn around the very morbid situation that we have, where in the history of a whole nation that has 50% men and 50% women, and that has many women who are medical practitioners, and like I've been advised or informed as I sought some information from the incoming and the outgoing, that in many medical schools, sometimes the girls outnumber the boys. And which means at the end of the day, if they do come through the process and they are practicing doctors, you don't have to have a plan that comes to life today. If you look at your realistic scenario now, you can decide that this is 2021. By 2030, if not before, how many presidencies would have taken place between now and then? How do we strategically ensure that by 2030 or 2028 or 2026, The next president of the Nigerian Medical Association will be a qualified, competent woman who has the capacity to deliver the change. But that comes when we ourselves are strategically minded and we're focused on long-term issues, and we forsake the things that people wrongfully say are the things that undermine women when they are gathered together. I'm a co-founder and a member of the board of trustees of WIMBIZ, Women in Management, Business and Political System. 20 years ago, when we were starting WIMBIZ, we were largely all in our 30s, a few were in their 40s. But we were all smart girls that were going somewhere. And everybody assumed that you cannot have 12 women and 1 man who are ambitious, driven, smart, going somewhere that can work together to build an association successfully. They were sure that we were going to fall apart somewhere along the line. But that only became our inspiration. It became the force that drove us to debunk the myth that stated that women cannot work together efficiently in order to deliver value. We knew that it was in the interest of not just ourselves, but the generation of Nigerian women who aspire into leadership, for us to work, for us to face our truth, face our limitations, do a gaps analysis of where we are, where we want to go, and what is missing, and to seek the knowledge that we needed in order to prepare all of us. And the knowledge was sought everywhere and anywhere. Whether it was men that had it, we didn't care if we had a panel of all men. As long as what we were seeking was available with them, we would take it. I remember we used to have a CEO forum, and we will gather CEOs of companies which were largely all men and say, tell us why you have no women on your board. Tell us what you're looking for that you cannot find. Tell us what is missing. And we gleaned all the knowledge and we put action plans behind everything that we found was a challenge. And we created a long-term plan that has resulted in, as you see women in the corporate world emerge in different places now, it didn't happen overnight. We've been driving that ship for the last 20 years, and we were dedicated and diligent about it. And one of the things we were determined was never going to happen was that we were never going to turn against each other in a way that our goal would be destroyed. And that we maintained. And 10 years after we started, all the founders decided that we were off running the organization. And we moved into the board of trustees. And we went to a next generation. And we started a new generation of leaders so that they took over. They brought in their own fresh ideas. We were all still very much in our late 40s, going into early 50s, but we had done our bit. We had established the foundation, and we brought in people that were at the same age as when we started. Osayi Alile, if I remember, was the first of the non-founding chair. And right after her came Aisha Ahmed, who is Deputy Governor of Central Bank now. And we've moved them. We set up a whole next generation. And they know that they're going to get to a place where they are going to allow the next generation to go as well. And within the next 1 year or so, we're actually even exiting the board of trustees, all of us, the founders. And we're leaving, we've done our work. We've set the foundation for the work to be done. It has become an institution that is globally recognized and supported by global organizations that help to fund our activities. And the women are thinking, and we have continued to challenge ourselves and to teach ourselves what we need to know in order to be competitive so that we can effectively be a value addition to nation building and corporate organizations in our country. So what is my challenge to you? Remember why you came together. Whatever your original motto or vision was, revisit it, revamp it for now and the future. Your motto is not permanent, it's a living being. You must always ensure that you're current for the time and the challenges of the season. You must evaluate the values that you have gathered, where you have come to. What do you need to do next? How do you move the organization to the next level? How do you make the organization relevant to the nation? Because it's not just about having an organization, it's about effectively using your talents and your skills to help the health services delivery in a nation. that has millions of people crying for help. And in doing that, sometimes you are going to make self-sacrifice. And in doing that, it's not about the individual you, it's about the national agenda of the organization. And don't allow the politics. I see all the campaign materials. That's necessary. You're going to choose leadership one way or the other. But just remember, in doing that, it's not about your tribe or your tongue. It's not about what I can give or what I can't give. It's about what talent and ability I bring to the table. It's about how am I able to help the vision and drive it. I'm not playing south, south, southwest, southeast, north, south. What's that got to do? You are professionals from the same mindset. You should be a microcosm of the nation that we want to build. You've been separated by your education, your skills, and your exposure. And the way you think should be an example of the kind of nation that we want to build. And when you do that, you can then collectively, without any division or working against one another, go to your National Medical Association and fight for equity. You can go and say, after every 2 male presidents, there must be 1 female president. There is nothing that says that is wrong. Nations across the whole world are campaigning for quota systems in order to get equity on board. And there's nothing that, if you do that, there will always be a qualified woman for the portion that is women. And when you have sort of increased the equity ratio, you would find it's easier to just have an open competition, because then you have more, the women have proven themselves. There are men that will vote for the women because they have seen the performance of other women. There are people in your association that in their lifetime, they have never seen a woman in the leadership of Nigeria Medical Association. So when you tell them to vote for one, they can't assess what they have not seen. And therefore, they settle to what they are used to. And what they're used to is their colleague, their friend, their network, their alliance, and they go back to it, and you guys will lose every time that goes on. But women are the ones in the world that have the highest power of influence, because we're wired that way. But it must be influence for good and influence to achieve a goal. And when you're fighting for the healthcare, it's the healthcare of a nation. And no matter how much work you're doing in silos, in your small NGOs or organizations that you're doing in your small silos, I remember what the professor said that caught my attention when he said, we have to collaborate and network more. Because when you work in silos, and women in particular are so used to working in silos. Women have power, but women's power exists in silos. Men have power that is highly interconnected, and therefore, their superpower of connectivity will always, in many cases, beat the unconnected power of women. And what you guys must learn to do is to create that network of relationships and power that gives you the superpower to achieve the change that you seek for good, and not change for change. Change that you seek for good. Because ultimately, you didn't go to medical school for so many years. You know the funny thing, as a student in secondary school, who was science good? My first ambition was to be a doctor. But the thing that killed it was when I found out that it's real dead bodies they use in medical school. So I will always hail you when I think I just could not imagine myself doing that. And that was it. I changed my mind very quickly, and ended up studying chemistry. And obviously, God was ordering my steps, because what would I have done? Medicine it draws you to want to care for the people once you have studied it. And Nigerians think once you're a doctor, you are mad if you do anything else. But you know what? It's just another qualification. That is the truth. What is most important is what is the best thing that you can do that suits who you are and where you're better able to bless humanity. And that's where you should find yourself. So even if I'd studied medicine, it would still have been a mistake for the person that I am, because ultimately my life has proven that I'm more of a social science person than a science person, and I can apply myself across multiple fields, and that's been the story of my life. Leadership. You're trained for it. Some say some are born leaders. You can have an innate ability to want to lead, but if you lead with lack of knowledge, you will destroy more things than build them. And therefore, you must have a system that nurtures and that builds leaders for the long term, but leaders with the right vision. You know, there's nothing wrong where in medical schools as are today, you have hours of power or something. For every class of a medical class, from their first year to their last year, you have health professionals who have been in government, who have seen what public health policy can be like, who have been in power, who knows the downfalls and the upsides of them, who come to speak to medical students once every quarter, every season, building their mindsets for how leadership, and bringing other non-medical people to build their mind differently so that their vision is colored not just by their medical training, but by what they can use that medical training to do beyond being in the theater or being in the consultation room, and being effective leaders who can influence, and combining your power together to agitate for the right change without destruction, so that we can have a better healthcare system for our nation. The reality right now is even the wealthy will cry sometimes, because despite those who have resources, if the facility is not available, you can't have what you need, let alone talk about those that have nothing. And the system cannot sustain what they need. You know, you look at people die because they can't find Panadol close enough, or they can't even afford it. A mother loses a child because she can't treat the child for malaria. How much does it cost to treat malaria? We have a malignancy in terms of our whole experience where our medical field is concerned. And I know that many of you try, and it challenges your oath that you take as a doctor when you look at the reality that is on ground, in terms of between saving lives and facing the reality that is on ground. And you know one more thing why I think women are critical to this? The first ones who are drawn to go abroad with the skill are the men. Why? Because naturally, men are more drawn by money than women are. Right or wrong? That is the truth. And the women will tend to stay for multiple reasons, either from a heart of compassion or because of a husband who is not drawn to go anywhere. They might desire it, but they will stay where their husband stays. And ultimately, we might end up, I hope we're not left with just the female doctors at the rate that people are leaving the shores of the land. I don't know what the patterns are in the hospitals in terms of people that are leaving, but it shows that we need to have a different approach to leadership. We need to redefine the governance rules of engagement that guides our organizations and that guides our administration of healthcare, but that allows the health professionals to be constructively engaged in the decision-making policy. And for us to retrain ourselves to be politically active without being agitators. Because one thing I have learned, in a system like ours, when you agitate, nobody hears what you say. Because the moment you open your mouth, they're expecting trouble, so their ears are blocked. That is the truth. You must understand how the system that you want to engage with, how it works. You don't go to war except you know that you can win. Sometimes you will deliberately lose so that you can wait until the moment that you can win. So there's a need to rethink the entire approach and be strategic about the results that we seek. And that requires leadership. There's no reason why most of doctors that get to high level have not gone to business school to get an MBA. Because if you're going to be an administrator and a manager of resources, you need more than your technical skills. And that education is key. Influence and impartation is key, which is why it's good to have someone like Professor Awoliyi here, but you need him and many people across different areas and other fields speaking to the medical professionals so that you can think differently and think out of the box. There's a whole new generation coming, and they will change the way this game is played. You know, the gentleman that made the presentation talking about all the digital healthcare entrepreneurs is showing you what is coming. I engage with some. I work with some as mentees and all of that. And I'm telling you, they have no respect for some of the things you guys are holding on to. They will redefine the game in a different way. And if the population follows them, governance will have to follow at some point. There would be a place of conflict over time, but there will be a point where they cannot be ignored. So it's also your responsibility not to become irrelevant in any way if you are not thinking along the emergence within the industry. So you need to think about the emergence of the industry. You need to think about the regulation and the administration of it. You need to think about the governance rules that will allow you to succeed with what you want to achieve as an organization, but you need to think more globally. And globally is not just about being a member of the international association. I'm talking about globally in terms of healthcare delivery for our nation, and how you as women who are involved in this space can be strategically involved in the policy decisions and the actions that lead to the service and the deployment of resources that will make the change. You cannot change what you've never experienced. You know, the chairman gave the precursor to my presentation, because everything he said in his paper, laying out all the data and the statistics, I don't like to repeat things, is why I'm not going to bother, because he had already laid that foundation, which shows a lot of the problems that the girl child and women are going through. If the decision maker is always from the view of a man, he cannot relate. How can a man explain your period pain when he's never had periods? How can a man understand the brain numbing pain of labor? He can imagine, but he cannot explain. He cannot understand because he has never been in that situation. There are multiple areas that cannot be dealt with by a man, even with the best of intentions, which is why ultimately we need a collaborative, collective front. But the women must equip and show up. You must equip, you must organize, and you must show up. It's not always that power is given to you. There are times you need to take the power. And for you to take it, you must organize yourself. And you will do that strategically and sacrificially. You will forget whatever divides you. You will come together and bind yourself with what holds you together. And some of you will not benefit from the fight you will fight, but the ones that will come after you will. And that will be good enough, because you have to play the long game. It cannot be. Leadership does not look with the short-term view. Leadership looks for the long term. You plan for the future, but you set the seed and the foundation for it now. And that's why I challenge you that the system of education itself, you need to think through it. Some of you are sat as deans in departments, or you're head of different areas. Start pushing for the right change. Ask for the curriculum to be reconsidered to produce the leaders of the medical field that you want tomorrow. And even if the system isn't preparing you, self-invest, prepare yourself. Make your own plans, decide where you want to be in the next 20 years, in the next 10 years. And do your gaps analysis, determine what is missing from where you are, what you know, and what you need to know in order to be where you want to sit tomorrow. And invest in yourself to prepare yourself to be able to compete effectively and efficiently for where you want to go. Life has to be more deliberate and intentional than accidental. You cannot expect the change that you want and hope it will come, that it will accidentally happen. Maybe accidentally after 40 years we'll have one other woman in either position, and after another 40 years they will accidentally have one. That's not how it works. Once you leave it, when someone holds power, they never give it to you. You have to fight strategically to share it. And what the women are asking for the men, please, this is not war. It cannot be, because we all go back home to a man at night. This is saying that there are two sides to a coin, and one side cannot carry the weight of the two sides, and that you need the two working together efficiently in order to be able to achieve the results that you seek. Otherwise, we have seen the results of a one-sided health governance in the country. This is the truth. Facts you cannot argue with. And the facts and the results shows that simply having men for the last 60 plus years has not produced for us the results that we seek. And sometimes, very smart people will tell you, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the act of a foolish man. That is the truth. Sorry, foolish woman too. So the men don't think I'm at war with them. This isn't it. My assignment here is to the women, and I'm only stating the facts as I know it. Leadership is cultivated. It's taught. It's prepared hands, is experience gained, is knowledge gained, and is target set. If you don't seek after it, you cannot get it. And may I finish by actually just using Professor Otolorin as a closing example. And I do that with all respect, sir. I do that because I want the men to understand that when you allow the women to use their talents, we all benefit. We gain. Nobody loses. And that's why you're such a good example. Like I know my husband is today sitting here. I've been here since about 10 o'clock, and I met you here. And you've been sitting here all along till this moment. Those are the men I call gems amongst men. The ones who have the courage, the conviction, and the confidence to support their wives to be the best of themselves, and there's no competition. The one who is bold enough to say, sitting here is making a statement, saying, I support my wife in seeking to become this leader of this organization. That's a real man. And those are the kind of men that we need to raise and to build. Those are the men that we need to raise our sons to be. The ones who are not threatened by their women folk, who understand that they bring value to the table and you bring value to the table. And when we let that value work together and the women also do their homework, then we have a better nation. I thank you, sir, as I thank all the men in the House and the chairman, because his speech showed that he's a real he for she that supports women in leadership. And I know that, sir, because you've always encouraged me, remember? He would see me at NESG or any of the conferences or something, and he would say, Mr. Awosika, are you writing all this, your speeches? Are you writing all these challenges? I want you to document them. Always. He never forgot to tell me that. I appreciate you today, sir, and I celebrate you. Because if you're a father of a girl, then you shouldn't be threatened by a wife. Because whatever you do with your wife is what you hope is what is likely to be done to your daughter. Because you sow a seed, you will reap it. So, thank you for the men who have wisdom and have understanding. And to my sisters in the house and our mothers, you have a lot of work to do, I must say. But you didn't come this far by not being able to work. I'm certain you can pull this off. Prepare yourself for the leadership that you seek. Fight for the right governance that gives you the opportunity to compete and to participate. And as you seek for solutions to women's health, remember, the skills you need to lead overall is beyond the health of women. You must have understanding about women's health, you must fight for it, but fight for the health of your husbands and your sons, and for the men and the women of the nation. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Can we be seated if we can? thought-provoking. Each time I have the privilege to sit under the sound of her voice, I am always blessed. An orator par excellence. And you will observe, I always tell journalists who ask for speeches, I said, not with Mrs. Ibukun Awosika. So you better be attentive, because you will never get, because she speaks completely extempore, and that she has done. An exemplar of humility and candor and long-suffering, you know, a woman of integrity of time in particular. She got here at 10 o'clock this morning and had to wait for at least 2 hours before it came to her turn to deliver her lecture. And you can see, just sit down there, no complaint, and that is a woman to follow. I say that to all the men. This is a woman to follow. Even the men, she's a woman to follow. Please put your hands together once again for our guest lecturer.